Here's the issue or the question. Two businesses, two founders, same industry, both equally successful in the business they've built. Both of them enter the franchise world. One scales and grows, builds a thriving franchise system. The other one gets stuck. Both of them check the boxes on the franchise their business process, right? Everything from FDD development, operations manual. What's the difference between the one that succeeds and the one that fails? And what it's going to turn out to be is that franchising isn't about checking the boxes. It's about substantively establishing and setting a plan, franchising your business, building a growth engine, and doing things a little different, focusing on your brand story, and the fundamentals of what made your business so successful. And today we're going to discuss the 7 strategic essentials that you, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, that you need to know about if you're thinking about franchising your business in 2025 or 2026. I'm Charles Internicola. I'm here with Nick Powles. We're co-founders of Good Spark Franchise, and together we've helped hundreds of emerging brands go from concept to scale. And today we're going to walk through and discuss 7 critical steps every founder needs to get right when franchising your business in 2025 and 2026. And the mission is to do something greater and build a brand that scales and grows. And today, Nick, I want to talk about the franchise growth gap, the point where so many people enter the franchise world, they get stuck. They don't understand why they're not succeeding as a franchise. They've maybe worked with a developer, they're checking all the boxes, but becomes a lot of form over substance, becoming a franchise, but not scaling to becoming a franchise brand. Nick, if you could frame our conversation today, because we're going to discuss 7 essentials that we need to know because we want to avoid this franchise growth gap, become a franchise the right way. If you could help us frame for you, as you see it on the ground, what is this growth gap?
You and I have had so many discussions, say over the last 5 years, to try to lay out what is the blueprint for success. And so we can extract some things that have come from this. One is, and we've filmed a masterclass on this, is that at the beginning stage of deciding to franchise your business, you tend to hire a consultant to help you franchise your business. And they sell you 2 main things. One is an FDD, which you're going to need, and that's usually a go-between between legal and the consultant for the brand, and an ops manual. Then they typically say go. And at this point, this is the part that all brands get stuck. They're like, okay, now what? And so what we've talked about is the third element that is so vital, which is the franchise growth manual of how are you going to accomplish things. And so if we look back in the last 5 years, we've seen so many brands stall out right at the beginning because it's go. They don't know what to do. They hope that leads are going to somehow magically come in, or they have wrong advice and they pay money into the wrong lead generators. And then flash forward 2 years, they're left with no new units, corporate, and they're evaluating or debating whether they should be franchising anyway. So structure, launch point is what we're talking about. And then now we sign a franchisee. Now what? How are we going to onboard them, make them successful and scale so we can duplicate or franchise our franchise to get the growth going? And so if we take those 3 elements and cross-apply to the brands that have won, and more so the brands that have lost, we can start extracting what is the keys to actually winning at franchise sales beyond franchising your business.
Right. And the scalability. So super productive today because I want to give everyone who's watching this video, we're going to create sort of an advanced level, at least what you should be focused on when you're thinking about franchising your business. And in this video, we're not talking about the particular steps, but I want to focus on strategy here. 7 strategic essentials. And where we're going to focus today is on, well, number 1, we framed what the franchise growth gap is, which is franchising your business is not the destination, it's the starting point. And so many people get stuck. And what I caution you about is sometimes you're working with consultants and advisors, you think momentum is happening, and in reality, you're not making progress. You're stuck and you don't know it. And so on the strategic level, the 7 essentials I want to focus on today, and Nick and I are going to discuss, is 1, your legal foundation, 2, your go-to-market strategy, 3, your operations manual. 4, brand positioning. 5, franchise sales process. 6, franchisee recruitment channels. And 7, franchise growth engine. And so we're going to discuss this framework in terms of what you need to know, leaping ahead or not getting stuck in this growth gap, and strategic insights that we see on a daily basis, right? And the goal here, again, when you're thinking about franchising, everyone's going to show you process and check the box. We want to get you from form to substance, right? And not get caught in this gap. So, Nick, let's start off with legal foundation, right? When we're developing FDDs at the legal end, and the focus here and the big takeaway is your legal needs to be an integrated part of your franchise development strategy. It just can't be these two separate silos, because in many ways your legal infrastructure, your FDD, your franchise agreement, how you set up territory structures, how your franchisees are going to operate needs to also align with your growth strategy, how you're going to position in the marketplace. And I'll just frame I'll frame a part of this, which is Nick and I have conversations all the time where his agency is working with a brand, and maybe I've spoken to them and we're realigning their FDD, their territory structures, fee structures. And a lot of times is, how does this all synthesize into how does legal reflect? So Nick, from a non-legal perspective, when you see brands that get stuck, what are some of the telltale signs that you see in their FDD and their legal infrastructure?
Yeah, there's a few things. One is apples to apples. Like get that in your head. I would say similar to you're doing some interior design in your house. You go on Pinterest, you go on Facebook, you look at other houses, you get inspired to then use that as a roadmap. The same is true for apples to apples. You need to be inspired by another FDD that might come up in the battle zone that you're going to battle against to get to the finish line. Hey, come here. You're messing me up, bro. Sit down. Sit. Thank you. Lay down. Thank you. I can pick up where I was.
You're saying apples to apples.
Yeah. So apples to apples, you have to compare. Apples to apples, you have to find another FDD that you compare well to, that you want to compare well to, and then you got to use that as the baseline for how you build yours. And so oftentimes the FDD ends up being templated, and a templated approach does not get you to a finish line. The apples to apples approach is also going to be essential in a world of AI, where when you plug in your FDD or your candidate plugs in your FDD, you want ChatGPT to talk about how yours compares to the ones that it's going to compare against. ChatGPT is going to be the future of the way that we look at the comparisons of a franchise opportunity, so you need to think ahead. The second thing that an FDD often misses, from my viewpoint, the construct is not designed around franchisee success. It's almost designed around franchise sales marketing. What I mean by that is item 5 and 7 go lower on the fees and the investments, and therefore it gives the brand the ability to say under $100,000 or less than the competitors. It's the wrong way to look at it. That marketing and the operating capital are essential to driving success of Unit 1, and oftentimes brands try to go cheap on that versus saying, how do we build a construct of really good business? And so the example that I give there, so many brands put a $10,000 mark for a grand opening. And my argument is, if you're trying to drive profitability, it's only going to be better for you as a franchise to drive gross sales in year 1. Take 10% of the total investment, put that as the number for marketing. It's a lot easier to tell the franchisee, you don't have to spend that. It's operating capital. You don't have to spend that. We've hit the milestones that we need to hit, versus going back and saying you're not hitting the milestones. You need to put more cash into it. So that's 5 and 7. Then 19, which is disclosing how much you could potentially make. Oftentimes that is also swung too far in a marketing direction, and it sets false expectations of the buyer. And when you set false expectations of the buyer, when you're thinking you're going to make X and you make Y, it derails your scale and it derails your morale, and therefore the brand stalls out. And so these are things that could be templated, but they're so vital to having these discussions as a formulation of franchising your business, so that you have an FDD that's competitive against similar investments and your competitive set. And from a franchisee standpoint, it is designed to drive them towards profitability and outperform average sales. And those are the things that tend to miss in the foundation.
Yeah, and we're going to move to the next one, but on this legal foundation and connecting the dots, guys, connecting what Nick's points are, right? He's talking about the FDD. Item 7, estimated initial investment, where franchisees are going to see how much they invest. Item 19, where you include your financial performance representations. The disconnect on the legal structure, and we're going to go to market, but on the legal foundation is you end up with two templated processes. A disconnected law firm that a developer says, hey, use them, and maybe they're not vested in it, that's just going to cookie cutter an FDD, and a developer that's just going to go through the motions, or sometimes go through the motions of, well, here's what you put in an FDD. What Nick is advising, what we're advising at Good Spark is, let's go a level deeper. Let's understand the goal here, make our franchisees successful, understand they're investing in you and investing in your system. Your job is to make them successful. So let's get beyond the superficial. You have AI, you have competition. Let's make our FDD on the legal end align with an honest approach to marketing strategy. Honest approach. What does our item 19 say about earning potential realistically, ROI, investment? And then let's even level it up by, let's be very strategic. Maybe our estimates are higher than others, but we're going to be more genuine about what's being invested. So the essential here is, don't just rely on people that are just giving here's our royalty rate and here's what you should put in your FDD. Let's reverse engineer what success looks like and make sure the FDD reflects that and is going to align with market strategy, which, Nick, gets us to the next essential, which is go-to-market strategy. And for me, this is a connected issue, right, with legal, because go-to-market strategy has a number of components, and one of which is going to be brand positioning, with some we're going to discuss in a little while. But go-to-market strategy in terms of your franchising KPIs. What's your initial franchise fee? What are your territory structures? What's your royalty rate? How do these all come together in a franchise ecosystem? Again, here, what you want to avoid is that cookie cutter approach. As I could tell you on the law firm level, we see so many things that have gone wrong. And again, these are hidden, growth gaps that people are stuck at. They don't even know why, right? And sometimes it's because they don't have the right FDD that matches their market strategy. Maybe it's a service business, multi-territory, right? Do you have royalties that scale properly? How does this all help franchisees succeed? So in terms of go-to-market strategy, you have your KPIs, right? Your franchise-specific KPIs. You have your compliance. Nick, from that prism, and we've had conversations. We had a conversation the other day, which I thought it was an amazing brand. It's a mobile business. I won't get into too much detail about what it is, but when I looked at the FDD, I felt like they're fighting with two hands tied behind their back. They have a fun business, scalable business, could be supplemental income replacement categories, and it read as if it were a brick and mortar restaurant, inflexible, not only for the franchise sales, but creating legal issues like franchisees with too big of a territory that are underperforming, inability to scale into additional markets. And I felt like it was holding them back, that go-to-market strategy and legal structure. Take it from there, Nick.
Is there a question?
The question is, go-to-market strategy. We're talking about essentials that everyone is watching this video that they need to know in a genuine way, because we don't want cookie cutter. We don't want check the box. I want to succeed. So when we're talking about go-to-market strategy, franchising KPIs, what should they be focused on here? Insights.
So one would be, change the definition of your goal in this process. So typically you go to franchise your business and you say, my goal is to franchise my business. And this goes all the way back to the opening statement. Your goal is not to franchise your business. Your goal is to sell unit one. And so now we're changing our perspective in the way that we're approaching this so that our go-to-market strategy is not built on let's just build, a gentle drumbeat on our franchise opportunity. It's actually designed to go sell unit one. And so that's part of where that go-to-market strategy starts getting built. When it comes to a brand, like you have to lift over rocks in the beginning stage. And rock one is going to be friends and family and connectors, fanatics of the brand. Someone that came to you and said, you should franchise your business. You pull over that rock and you say, what's my strategy to get in front of them? Well, they told you should franchise your business. They might not know what franchising is. So now you have an educational side that you get to skip the line a little bit because you have a built-in audience that might be a fan of the brand. That's strategy one. Strategy two is around your existing location to start building some noise that indeed you are a business opportunity. And here are the advantages of joining your system. And so that would be around call it the community that you're in to try to spread awareness that you exist. And level three would be outside of the community of how are you going to create noise within your state and the neighboring states to start building up that groundwork. That gives you where am I going to go to with my market strategy. And now the messaging is going to hopefully align back to what you put in the FDD, which is the construct of your business that is indeed franchisable and scalable. And so now your messages start to align back to what we talked about on level one, which is the legal, into now I need to distribute to friends, my community, and my state. It'll give you a pathway into now how do you start telling that story to try to get in front of someone who might want to buy your franchise.
Nick, from a franchise fee royalty structure, when you're evaluating brands that are experiencing friction, what are some of the mistakes you see on how they're structuring those KPI items?
How much money did you have in the bank when you started your business?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
I don't know, not much.
Right. Me neither. What's interesting is all these businesses, all these beautiful businesses that are franchising now, very rarely do they start with anything in the bank account. What that allows them to do is grit, hustle, and making like the bootstrapping actually count. And so your job as a franchisor or our job as a consultant is to remove as many obstacles as possible for people that are making this big decision to quit a job and now go into business ownership. And oftentimes, especially today, the rising costs of royalty and extra fees and nickel and diming the customer and the franchise fee eliminates such a large percentage of people who could be fantastic franchisees. You and I are successful business operators, but it's because of those intangibles. And so when I look at a fee, if the fee is too high, you are creating an obstacle. If your royalty is not driven to profitability of the franchisee, you're creating an obstacle. If your tech package goes beyond bootstrapping, you're creating an obstacle. So you have to be in the business of removing those obstacles, and that's my opinion on royalty and everything.
On the 7 essentials, right? Strategic essentials. I'm franchising when you franchise your business, operations manual is critical. At Good Spark, we have a ton of options in terms of operations manuals, from our clients that do them themselves to real structure and operations manuals. But we want insights here. And so, sure, you need an operations manual, how-to guide for your franchisees. But Nick, from a strategic standpoint, for people that are considering franchising their business, what do you want to share with them on the operations manual?
It goes back to what I was saying about the FDD and the construct of the business. Everything has to be aligned to drive maximum gross and net profitability for the franchisee.
Yeah.
And so right now in today's franchise manual world, it's more of a checkbox than a toolkit. And when you change the mindset to say this operations manual has to align to how are we going to drive the highest amount of gross sales and profitability for franchisees, it might change your perspective in the way that you organize it and build it. Oftentimes these things sit on a shelf. They are not used as a part of like the Bible of how you operate said franchise. And when it is, it's an asset. So in my opinion, you have to look at every chapter of that ops manual to also have an accompanying video. And I would almost do video and then text in the way that I would structure this, so that there's something, a resource that those franchisees can go back to, a master class. Think of that. That's the word. I want people to think of the operations manual as the master class of your business.
From a strategic standpoint, what I think you mentioned is critical is you need to reverse engineer the operations manual, at least the mindset of how you approach it, which is to help your franchisees achieve profitability and growth. And when when we're comparing the brand that grows versus the brand that doesn't, the brand that grows is looking at the operations manual. Number one, when they franchise their business, is just version 1.0. They understand it needs to keep improving and taking different media forms and evolving as franchisee frustrations and friction come about, different processes, pre-opening, marketing, and make it a tool that can be used, an LMS system. That's what the franchisor that scales and grows. The one that doesn't, the one that gets stuck, they're handed the operations manual from the team and they just put it away and they think it's good. And in many ways, they've gotten something very generic. And that's why we take a very different approach to operations manuals. So on the operations manual, this document needs to be critical. It's not just something you ask someone else to do. View it through the viewpoint, not of what are my technical things, but how do I make franchisees profitable and successful as well as system standards? And to Nick's point, I think look at it from a different prism. And if you want to be the franchisor that succeeds, it's an evolution. Next, strategic essential. Um, Something we talk about a lot, Nick, and something I know I'm fixated on because to me, is brand positioning. And so I'll frame this as follows. We've received calls from brands that didn't work with us and say, Charles, Nick, I franchised 2 years ago. I've followed their game plan. I've spent a ton of money. I'm investing in marketing and PR, and I'm going through meta leads and I'm getting leads, but I'm not getting deals. Nothing. I feel like I'm stuck. And then when we look under the hood, we get to the website. We don't see anything about the founder, anything about mission, nothing unique, no three uniques. And I'm flooded with franchise industry general terms about franchise with us. So brand positioning is off. No brand promise, no why us, why now. There's just nothing there. So what do founders need to be aware of when they're approaching this in the franchise process?
It's tough because the way that I would put it, there's a lot of snakes in the garden when it comes to franchise lead generation. And the reason is because of franchisors. They say, where are my leads? They don't say, where are my deals? They say, where are my leads? So you have all of these potential solutions built around spending your money and keeping you as long as they can. And then when it doesn't work, they go get another client. That's sales for most industries, period. For you, you've been there, done that. You know who your persona is. You know who your avatar is. You know who you're looking for. But oftentimes, it's another checkbox. The website's a checkbox versus saying, if I were to take myself out, how would I sell myself on this business? What excites me about this business? And oftentimes, when you and I are doing a podcast with a founder, and we say, tell us about your business, there's so many tremendous nuggets in them talking for 15 or 20 minutes that could easily just be transcribed into content that frames their brand story. But they don't do that. They go back to buy my franchise. And so the two things there are obviously trust vendors, but cut the cards, make sure that you're challenging them to say, give me examples where you've done something that has impacted a brand that you're working with. And then secondly, just you sitting down and talking to a camera for 10 minutes of saying, if you wanted to excite someone on buying your brand, this is what you would say. You could have the bullet points or just upload the video to ChatGPT and let it do it for you. This is not hard. It's just often skipped because much like the operation manual, much like the FDD, it's just a check mark.
Right. And that gets to a point, which is you need to evolve into it. It's not going to happen all on day one. You need to understand it's part of the process. You, as a founder, finding your voice and getting comfortable with it versus development companies that say, we're going to position this for you. Turns out you're more important to the process than they are or we are. And so the process needs to help you unlock your brand story. And Nick, we've seen it so many times at our Friend Camp conferences, founders that didn't get it right on version 1 or version 2 or version 3, but then they come back to another conference and they're getting it right. And then months later, they have a YouTube channel and then they're leading the way. So on brand positioning, understand it's not a destination, it's a process, and you need to keep evolving into that, which gets to the next essential, which is franchise sales process, right? Again, if you do everything all at once at the end of 90 days, here's everything, it's pretty static. And franchise sales process, everything from, what does your franchise sales website look like? But maybe that's on brand positioning. What is the opportunity guide or materials you review with franchisee candidates? What CRM system you're using? How do you onboard? What's the storytelling look like? How do you control the experience that people that raise their hand and want to communicate with you about your franchise opportunity? So Nick, essential items there. What are the insights for founders on that?
One is, if you can and you have it, the value of the wingman is great for call one. Call one, someone other than the founder talking to someone and saying, all right, tell me why you're interested in this business. Do you have enough cash? What does your net worth look like? What does your timeline look like? Like, let someone warm up your candidate, so that on call two, if they pass that call, they pass that beer test. Now you talk to them about the business opportunity and why they should be seriously considering that. If call two goes well, in my opinion, you then disclose the FDD. You say, I'm going to send you the FDD, sign the receipt page, get this back, and then we're going to review this together. After that, now you've given them the information. They have the playbook. Now let them ask you some questions that may have come up. In my opinion, you should already have pre-filmed it. Some brands aren't going to have the resources to do it, to say this is what you're going to see in our FDD. But now you've already, you've danced. And so I think, my ultimate advice is, don't make the dance too long. I've been at discovery days that are 6 hours of presentations. It's too much. You can have really good conversation. You can gut check them, and you can check the candidate very fast to know if they're serious or not. And the last thing I'll say on that is, if you develop franchisees, you win. And so if it turns into you having to sell too much to this person and convince them, if you find yourself convincing the candidate, it's probably not the right candidate. The hardest thing for an emerging brand to do is say no. But saying no, bigger picture, could mean a tremendous outcome for your brand later on.
Nick, before we go to next essential, on the franchise sales process, so many people that approach the franchising world, right? Founders, successful business, that want to hire a consultant or company like GoodSpark to help them franchise. Should they be on guard of? Because my concern is, people say, yeah, we do the process for you, and here's your franchise sales materials, and here's your franchise sales process, and here's your franchise sales projections. And then I look at it, they don't know. They just receive generic fluff. So how do you guide yourself? And I guess the answer is, be aware of it, but how do you know this is, because a lot of people say, well, I trusted the expert. And then when we look at it, it's just boilerplate.
Yep. The two things that I would say, your number one tools, your top tools in business, are your head, your heart, and your gut. That'll give you a good playbook, and you can often find a lot of answers using those three tools. The second thing that I would ask anybody that helps franchise businesses is, they're very quick to talk about the successes, which oftentimes had nothing to do with them franchising the business. It had everything to do with the depth of that business and what it was able to accomplish. But they celebrate the successes. Ask them about the failures. Ask about the times that it didn't work, so that you can put up some some gut checks along the way to make sure that you don't fail, because it's very expensive to franchise your business. It's very expensive to go to market. And if you don't know what a failure looks like, you could oftentimes find yourself over investing to get to outcome that you're quite disappointed in.
Nick, essential number six, that we want to equip essential number six that we want to equip new franchisors or founders with is understanding franchisee recruitment channels. And here, what I want to expose is what don't so many new franchisors understand about the different franchise sales channels, from brokers, organic, referrals. How should they be evaluating those recruitment channels, those sales channels?
One, everything is drumbeat. Everything. You hire a broker, you still need to create a drumbeat to make them understand what your business is, so that when they go talk to a candidate, you've given them the tools to explain what your business is. Like, there's so many brands that say, we're going to go with the brokers, but then don't put in the work to now onboard those sales consultants to be able to sell the brand. And they're like, yeah, I got this lawn care brand and it might be good for you, but they don't know how to say what the why you why now is, because you don't. And so that is complete drumbeat. Drumbeat comes in two areas: drumbeat to prospective buyers that didn't know you were a franchise, and drumbeat to people that are already fans of your brand. Always your franchisees, especially as you get going, those are going to be your number one sales lead generators, the referral, and leveraging their stories to get in front of others. There are tactical things that you can do: PR, Meta, LinkedIn, Google, trade shows. Those are all tactical things. Oftentimes, the consultants that help franchise businesses tell you to go do that because they don't know how to help you craft your brand story. And so they tell you to go do the tactics without nailing the first part. But drumbeat, it's all drumbeat. And so if you're going to commit to doing something, brokers, PR, content, website, you're going to commit to it, then you got to keep that drumbeat going. The second you stop that drumbeat, now it turns into more of a crapshoot.
Yeah, and connecting the dots, right? Because we see so many brands where they'll pay to join a broker group. They'll go to broker conferences. They'll go to franchise trade shows, but they haven't positioned their brand. So now when they have a conversation with a broker, there's nothing unique about the business. There's no differentiator. They don't know how to approach that conversation. When they're at a franchise trade show, there's nothing there. And even if there is a valid conversation, when the broker follows up, looks at the website, asks for materials on the franchise sales process, they see a lot of generic. And so that's where a number of things start failing. On number seven, Nick, essentials here, founders, franchising. You need to understand again that your goal is to make franchisees successful. So you need to be building a growth engine. And so while you're thinking about franchising your business, what I find as you go through the process, too many consultants and developers aren't helping you focus on what's going to help you create successful franchisees. Ongoing coaching, monitoring franchisee KPIs, what validation they're going to provide in the future, and community, right? Your greatest obligation is make them successful. You don't have to have this all figured out, but ironically, if you focus on these success factors and your obligation to build that growth engine and that coaching, you're going to magnetize your brand. So someone new to the franchise world, what should they be focused on here, Nick?
It still goes back to what we talked about in the beginning. Be in the business of creating great business. You've already done it once. You got to do it again. And so most of the time you've reflected backwards and said, I would have done this differently, or this worked really well. Documenting those now are going to be essential, because your franchisee is most likely going to go through the same things. So really backcasting on what worked and what didn't, and using that as a leverage point. But everything here on out, FDD, ops manual, website, drum beats, support structure back to your franchisees, your fees, we've talked about all these things, has to be built around driving the highest amount of gross sales for your franchisees, which in turn is going to drive net revenue. And remember, you do not make any money off of that franchise fee that is designed to onboard the franchisee. You make money off of the royalty. And so if that number goes up, you make more. The higher it goes, the more you make, the more you make, the more you can invest into your franchise, the higher likelihood it is that you're going to grow this into something that is spectacular and be one of the 1% that crosses over the 100 unit mark. But if you make some errors and go cheap on some of those decisions, then watch what happens. You're going to have these stall outs that are going to be super uncomfortable, where you're looking in the mirror and saying, should I have franchised this? Was it worth it? And you don't want to get there. So put the stops in place now.
Yeah, and look, the goal is create enterprise value, 5-year vision, and it begins and ends with your franchisee success. Um, and before we're going to follow up on a bonus round here, which has to do with avoiding this growth gap. But guys, those 7 strategic essentials that you should be focused on, again, thinking about substance over form is, well, before we get there, is just understanding there is a growth gap. You don't want to get stuck in it. And then the essentials to focus on: legal foundation, go to market strategy, operations manual, brand positioning, franchise sale process, franchisee recruitment channels, franchisor growth engine. And Nick, as we get ready to wrap up, the growth gap, right? So we listed a number of essential factors, and I think it's critical to understand it's not about checking the box on all of them. You could miss a couple and get it wrong if you do that. My concern more is being substantive as to the things you're doing. Because just skimming the surface, checking everything off, and some developer telling you, okay, congratulations, that's a recipe to at least get blindsided or have gaps that you're not aware of. What's your advice from an entrepreneurial standpoint, from a leadership level, a founder, Nick? How, like, because you don't know what you don't know. So how should they go about evaluating the process?
The gap is this: capital. So start there. If you barely have enough cash to franchise your business, hold for a year, stack up some cash so that you have the cash to actually go grow. Like if I start with issue 1, it ends up being undercapitalized franchisors that don't have enough money to create the drumbeat that we were talking about. So that's 1. 2, if you're brick and mortar, real estate. If you're not brick and mortar, territory mapping. Real estate ends up being critical. I saw a brand a few weeks ago. They were on the wrong side of the street. If someone would have said, go on the other side of the streets where the traffic pattern was and it's easy to turn into their parking lot, they wouldn't have to convince someone to drive down to the next lane, take a left, take another left, turn around, take a right to get into their unit, even though it was the highest traffic pattern. That was an error in judgment by the franchisor of looking at that unit. Real estate ends up being critical. And then what is the billboard around that real estate? Your brick and mortar, your billboard could still be your mobile truck. It does no good with it parked in your garage. Put it on the street. It's your billboard. And number 3, the growth gap ends up being expectations.
Yeah.
If you over index on how much you can make, and that number is built on your sales because you've done this for 10 years and you built this up and you put that number in there, but the reality is first year sales are going to be far less. If you don't disclose that properly, what's going to happen is your franchisee is going to do that first year sales. They'll probably be around the number that you hit. They're going to be deeply disappointed because it's not the gross sale that they saw in your item 19. And therefore, a 3-unit deal, a 2-unit deal, a 10-unit deal, it will never turn to fruition. It'll be called a SNO, which is called sold not open, because you did not set the expectations right. Capital, real estate, expectations. That's
Yeah, and
the
I'll
difference.
just add one other item, Nick, onto that. You referred to expectations of the franchise buyers, right? Which is critical. And I'll leave off with your expectations as a founder entering the franchise world, which is If you enter the franchise world thinking that franchising is just a money maker for you on day one, year two, you're going to fall into the growth gap. Understand, when we focus on franchising, we're working with our client brands. At a minimum, we're focused on a 5-year time horizon. You become a franchise in about 120 days. Look at your first year as a franchisor, your first 24 months as a franchisor, as seasoning and building the foundation. You've become a franchise already. But now let's see how the market reacts, how your consumers react, how your organic contacts react. Then take version 1.0 of your website, make it better, make your founder story better. So if your expectation is a continuous improvement process, even with limited budget, over time, what could look like slow growth over 3 years becomes hyper growth over 8 years. So just get those expectations right. Avoid any expectation that sales are easy and growth is easy right out of the gate. Guys, these essentials, just keep them in mind as you think about franchising a business 2025, 2026. Love to have a conversation. If you reach out to our team at Good Spark, let's have an honest assessment, honest conversation. Check out our conferences and camps, and it'd be great to meet up. Thank you, everyone.